Thank you, Minister, for being available. Given the huge public interest in this, how is it that you can justify such a short submission process for the public? We as a committee have had a number of organisations actively approach us wanting to share their information and science around this and their concerns about the fact that New Zealand is way above other countries that we compare ourselves to with youth vaping. There is a huge public interest, and yet the submission time is so short for the public. How do you justify that?
I think I'd respond in two ways. Firstly is that there is a significant program of work that will follow, and that will be reported back later this year around the entire regulatory regime. So I fully appreciate there's a lot of work we need to do in this space. This was very targeted to ensure that we get something in place to both increase the deterrent factors of enforcement, do some work around proximity, and then more importantly to clarify the types of products that we're going to allow into the market. But by no means is this an end position. We were very keen to ensure that there was something strong in place before next year, and we focused on that. And that's why this bill is a relatively small scope. There isn't definitely an assurance that we will continue to do further work around this regulatory regime and the legislation as a whole. And I think it's important that that's balanced with the fact that right now is about putting something in place. We know that there is a real issue around the deterrent component of the fines. We know that there is a real confusion around the types of products, and we wanted to make sure that the products that are used by young people are not available, and that's what this program of work is. So I think the assurances to the public and to the committee itself is that there will be a lot more work done in this space around how we manage this regulatory regime, but I think responding to the high public demand and also recognising that there has been significant work in this space over the last 3 years, or since really 2020 when we first started putting regulation in place. So we have learned a lot. I think there's a lot more knowledge in place, and the officials are aware that there's a lot more knowledge around what we're trying to achieve here. So I think moving forward, we have this is a sort of constrained piece of work around making sure we are responding firmly and strongly around youth vaping, but recognising that there is a lot of dialogue still to be had in this space, and we will continue with a broader program of work. As you'll be aware, this legislation has been tweaked and changed a lot since it first came into play, and that's a part of the challenges we're dealing with. But doing a broader piece of work, I was concerned that we wouldn't get the legislation in before the next school year, and I think we're really wanting to make sure that there is some strong actions in place and some clear messages being sent that it's still a priority.
But rather than rushing the legislation, wouldn't it be better to focus on enforcement? We have had evidence as a committee that there's been only 2 prosecutions taken over recent times against selling to youth. Clearly enforcement is an issue. Wouldn't it be better to get the enforcement sorted and slow down the legislation so people can have their say?
I think, yeah, that's a strong point, and that's why this isn't an either or, this is an and.
Sorry, I had to join in there.
We are doing a lot of work in that space. All of last year, we had 110 infringement notices issued for the whole of last year. We've had 119 issued up until 9th of September this year. All of last year, we had 1 prosecution. This year, so far, we've initiated 8 prosecutions this year. So there has been a significant ramp up. We also know that last year we had very little enforcement capability dedicated to the tobacco space. We are on target to have our full strength of 16 enforcement by the end of this year. So I can assure the committee there is a strong focus on enforcement, regular accountability around what we've been delivered. And I think we're seeing that results in the increase in prosecutions. I think the increase in penalties will be a significant factor to improve that enforcement. But again, reiterating, we're not talking about this as the end position. There's further work to be done. But definitely enforcement is an important component, and it's and definitely in this space.
Given, final sup through you, Mr. Chair. Given the narrative around your links to the tobacco industry, given the tax cuts to big tobacco, given the public's concern over that, wouldn't you be better to allow more time to get the legislation right and also enhance your own credibility when it feels to members of the public that this is just an agenda to fast track things in favour of big tobacco and in favour of vaping?
I'm going to strike that one out. I think the Minister has said numerous times and in the House that she doesn't have any links to big tobacco, so we're not going to have questions that are premised on stuff that the Minister has already said aren't factual. So thank you, Ingrid. No.
Order, Mr. Chair, this is about perceptions. I certainly didn't suggest that the Minister does, but there is a perception that I think from a process perspective the Minister needs to answer. So that is to not cast any aspersion on links, but to say there is a narrative where the process, good process, would require a different response. And I would really like to hear the Minister's response to that.
I think you were inferring that, and that's the way I took it. And I'll be the judge of that. The Minister doesn't have to answer the question. She may if she wants to. But then we'll move on.
I'd be happy to respond to the question, because in the vaping space, I think that the clear message is that we are being very strong, and that's why we are trying to push the momentum. And as I've repeatedly said, we want to increase penalties. We want to increase enforcement, which is being done now, and that putting tighter regulations and more enforcement, in terms of penalties, clarifying this is actually doing exactly what we're trying to achieve, which is, from a credibility point of view, is delivering what we committed to do at the beginning of the year and what Cabinet have signed off on doing.
Thank you, Ingrid. Thank you.
I think someone needs to sit down there and learn how to sit down there and have their camera. Otherwise, I might just talk like this all night long. Thank you, former journalist Ingrid Leary, for giving this as a good example of how to sit there and not do things when you're on camera.
Yeah. Just imagine being interviewed by her. She'd be like staring into your soul.
Now, we do have this. Does Select Committee powers have any purpose? What's the purpose of them? So the point of bills going to Select Committee is so that the public can put their submissions. They make sure they do not, say, in theory, break another law, and it's meant to iron out a lot of the parts of the of laws to make sure that they're good quality laws. Now, truncated Select Committee processes probably don't help, as I recently, as a business owner, so I sell a banana maple waffle delight at my coffee cart, and it says 3 waffle trees. Was it grilled banana and whipped coconut cream on top? Now, you can't buy whipped aerosol coconut cream cans in New Zealand. So what I've got to do is buy an 8.5 gram, cream charger, which is full of nitrous oxide that fluffs up the cream. Recently, there was a bill, recently there was some regulation changes that have come through that has made it virtually impossible to buy those cream chargers. Now, the frustrating thing about being in New Zealand is the fact that in order to have whipped coconut cream, this is the only way you can do it. Yep. Now, I have managed to get to Bidfood and buy them from Bidfood rather than the places normally buy them through in Auckland. So, okay, I've got somewhere, but that was a frustrating part. Now, the Select Committee process is meant to iron out ridiculous things like this. And for all those wondering, I have emailed my local MP, Julian Genta, on the issue.
Right, we've got to get you some whipped coconut. So I looked at the bill, and so under Section 40, basically penalties if you sell stuff to under 18-year-olds. The penalty can go from 10,000 to 100,000. It's been increased to 100,000. So basically, the minimum fine is 10,000. The maximum fine is 100,000.
Yeah, and for STA on there, if the bill's under urgency, you can skip the Select Committee process.
Yeah.